I'm from Audioboom. I'm the VP of Content and Production at Audioboom. And at Audioboom, we host, distribute, and monetize podcasts. And we do it with some of podcast's most exciting and creative talent, from Saving Grace to Sam and Billy, Case File to Red Handed. And in this session, we're going to chat to a couple of people behind some of the hit shows on our network. But first, I wanted to just share some facts about the wider podcast industry. So to do that, I've recruited a couple of people that we know from a big show that we look after called No Such Thing as a Fish, and they've done us a little video. So this is Dan Schreiber and Andrew Hunter Murray from No Such Thing as a Fish talking podcast market facts. Oh, nearly. This is a word malfunction, isn't it?
Hello, IAB Upfronts Conference. How you doing? I'm Dan, this is Andy. We are two members of the No Such Thing as a Fish podcast team, and we just wanted to jump in on your conference here, say we're sorry we can't be there in person, but we wanted to quickly share some of our favorite podcasting industry facts with you. Andy, go.
Okay, fact number one, podcast listeners are incredibly engaged with the content they're listening to. According to the latest Radar Midas survey, 70% of people, once they've started listening to an episode, will listen all the way to the end, which is nice. For our podcast, it's 85%, without wanting to brag.
Ooh,
so people will be hearing our adverts.
And in a typical Audioboom episode that you might be listening to, you're going to get about 3 to 4 adverts in the space of an hour's episode, which is very different to commercial radio, where in an hour you might get like 18 to 20 adverts in one go. It's a way more comfortable listen.
Yes. The other thing that Audioboom do, they sell baked-in adverts which work better than dynamically inserted ones. And in fact, in a recent Audioboom audience survey, 60% of respondents said that they pay more attention to adverts they hear on podcasts than to any other kind of advertisement.
Very cool. All right. So if you want to find out more, head into the bar and find those Audioboom people. They'll be getting pissed by the bar, drinking beers and wines. Get them, find out more, and have a great conference. Bye. Bye.
So Audioboom are here. They are hopefully not yet pissed at the bar, but do find us later. So just to underline some of those facts that Dan and Andy shared there. The first being that podcast listeners are incredibly engaged. And engagement in podcasting is something that we can absolutely quantify. So by engagement, what we really mean is retention. So if somebody is not engaged by your podcast, they're not going to be retained. So the more engaging you are, the higher your retention figure. And the way we work out that retention figure is to ask a very simple question, and that is, if you hit play on an episode, do you make it all the way to the end? So if you have a high retention figure, then people are making it all the way to the end of your episode. So it is really quantifiable. And of course, these podcasts are talking about products and services, so the higher retention, the more engagement they have, the more likely podcast listeners are to hear advertising. No Such Thing as a Fish is a great example. So they have a global audience, over 400 million lifetime listens, and their retention level is more than 85%. So more than 85% of their audience hit play and make it all the way through to the end of the episode. Another show that we look after, Killers, Cults and Queens. This is an Audioboom Studios original. 80% female audience. And that female audience not only took the show to #1 on Apple and Spotify's true crime charts, but they also deliver a 90% retention figure. So 9 out of 10 listeners to that show hit play and make it all the way to the end of the episode. Another thing that the Fish talked about there was baked-in reads. So we sell something quite unique at Audioboom, and that is a baked-in live read. So the live read is stitched into the fabric of the content. It lives actually in the episode, in the individual episodes of the show. It's not dynamically inserted across the channel. And so what that means is you get less skipping through the adverts. So the higher the retention, the less the skipping, the more the engagement with your advertising. And also, one major advantage for the baked-in live read is that it lives in the episode wherever that episode is consumed, whether that be on Apple or Spotify or YouTube, which is becoming increasingly important to our podcast market. So it's the second largest search engine in the world. It has more than 2 billion visits a month, and it is now the third biggest listening platform for podcast listening. So just behind Apple and Spotify, the third biggest. We did a survey at Audioboom, and we asked people about their listening habits, and almost 50% said they had tried YouTube for listening to a podcast. Just under 20% said they actually prefer YouTube for listening to a podcast. And creators are becoming platform agnostic as well. So they are more comfortable sharing their content not only on Apple and Spotify and the rest, but also across YouTube as well. A great example of that would be one of the year's breakout hits, Saving Grace. So this is a show that is consumed across all of the audio platforms that you would expect, but it's also simulcast across YouTube as well. And that's a Gen Z listener consuming that show. And contrary to popular opinion of short attention spans of a Gen Z listener, that show enjoys around 80% retention. And Grace is obviously also running the live reads that we're selling in that show across YouTube. So that's some facts to take away. But now I'd like to introduce you to a couple of people behind some of the shows that we look after at Audioboom. So in a moment, I'm going to speak to Chris from the F1 podcast, Beyond the Grid and F1 Nation. But first, please welcome to the stage from Audioboom, Alexandra at Jueno, and one half of the hosts of Devils in the Dark, Danni Howard.
Hello. Like Mike said, I'm Alexandra, and I'm here with Danni Howard, one half of the hit true crime show, Devils in the Dark. Devils in the Dark exploded onto the true crime scene in February this year, and it's gained a massive, loyal and passionate fan base in just the last 7 months alone. It's been top of the true crime charts on Apple and Spotify, and it has over 1 million listens. Danni, welcome. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. I'm probably the only guest that has cards because I'm just really pregnant and need to remember the words I know.
That is no problem at all. For those who haven't heard Devils in the Dark, can you tell us about the show?
So, me and my best friend Helen, we have essentially started a true crime chat show by accident, where we take a lighter look at true crime. We're sort of going for like a cozy pub chat with your friends kind of vibe, because it becomes quite evident we're not experts in true crime. And so we bring a new case each week where we learn along with our listeners about the case, about true crime and the whole world about it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I say that as producer of Devils in the Dark, so I'm a bit biased. But I do think that it's obvious why this show is such a success. People come for the true crime, but they stay for the girls. And that's where I think it gets really interesting when it comes to host read. So I'll do some stats. We have a really vast audience for Devils, and people tune in from all over the world, but the majority of our listeners come from the UK, about 76%. And 76% of those listeners are female identifying. And this is the most important part. Of those UK-based female identifying listeners, the biggest chunk are aged 25 to 34 years old. And that's really important for two reasons. Firstly, because true crime resonates the most with that demographic, so we're in the right place, but also because that demographic are much more likely to spend money on the brands that we share with them. But it's not all about selling. We have a great relationship with our listeners, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, they come for the true crime case. You know, they want to hear the gore and the darkness, but they actually stay because they're invested in mine and Helen's relationship.
Yeah.
And in return, we're really invested in having a relationship with our listeners. Being authentic to them is really important to us. And I think they trust us to be honest, and they know that we will only bring products that we are comfortable using or enthusiastic about to the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And getting a really nice host read is really easy when you've got two great hosts. Like Danni said, we make sure with the girls first that they're happy to endorse a brand. And then from there, I get a brief through from our brilliant commercial team, and the girls get sent through some samples of the product. I then write a script with all the key information that the brand needs, and I leave loads of room for your genuine experience with the product. You get to try out loads of fun stuff.
We do, yeah.
What's that like for you?
Well, so I think you could say like the process for us is we have quite an organic approach to our ads. We obviously work around the key messages that we're given, but once we've had a chance to try the product, like with, say, Stitch Fix, it's not just the online quiz. We've got the box arriving. You can look at the clothes, you can touch them, you can smell them, you could not taste them because that would be weird. But like, people can tell once we're talking about it and we have a conversation about it that we've actually tried the service. And I think that's really important that comes across to be genuine because they will listen to us because they're interested.
Yeah, definitely. And then once you've kind of, got stuck in, we go to the studio and we record. And because we don't want our host reads to sound like really adverty, we don't tend to put a limit on those ads. So some of them could be like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. But because the content is good and because you've tried the product, it does just sound like, two mates talking about something they've liked recently, or like one of you recommending it to the other. But more than the content, it's really important how we weave those host reads in, isn't it?
Yeah, so working with true crime, obviously, we handle a lot of sensitive and delicate subject matter. And it would be really inappropriate to be like, oh, yeah, this horrible thing happened to this victim, and also you should use this skincare brand. So I think our sort of method has really evolved as the podcast has evolved with how we lead into the ads. So our audience still know they're about to listen to an advert, but they're more inclined to know that we're also going to give them something interesting to listen to, because each ad for each brand, we might have the same brand a few weeks in a row. It will be different every time because we're chatting about it each time.
Yeah, and you've done something during the week that you're like, oh my God, this happened when I used it this time. So they do a bunch of great host reads every time. They knock it out of the park, I think. But we did a really nice one a few weeks ago for the brand Calm. It was in a Dennis Nilsson episode, so you can imagine what that was like. And it's really nice because Helen's a long-time user of Calm, and you were still kind of thinking about trying it out. So in a way, you kind of reflected the listener experience. I'll stop talking about it and we can have a listen.
I downloaded it about 2 years ago. It's so good. I haven't actually used it yet, but I keep meaning to because you keep saying how good it is.
It is, especially when you can't sleep.
I'm really interested in the sleep stories, particularly.
Yeah.
Because sleep is something I really struggle with.
I find it useful, especially, well, I didn't know this when I first downloaded it because I have a busy mind, I have a racing mind. I thought that was down to stress. But now we all know that's because I have ADHD. So when I go to bed, that's when my brain is like, oh, hey, let's do some stuff. Whereas I find Calm is good because it gives my brain something to listen to and focus on. And that helps my brain then go, okay, let's go to sleep. So, I mean, I don't know if that is for definite, like, a thing, but for me, it helps.
Well, I know for me, I have a highly anxious brain.
Yes.
So I will lie down and be like, you forgot to worry about this earlier. And remember, like, you looked a bit sweaty when this person was talking to you and they probably think you're gross now. I need something to drown that out. Yeah. I need to think about, like, a small cabin in the woods. I listened to one once and it was about a cat's footprints in the snow. And it was so tranquil.
Sounds really nice. It was. I think it's really obvious why 90% of our clients come back to spend more money with us. It's that kind of genuine trust and connection that you just don't get in any other medium. Thanks so much, Danni.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Does that mean switching off? Great.
Thank you both. I could do with some of that Calm for my clicker anxiety. So we have one more person that we're going to chat to, and the chap up next is Chris Browning. Please welcome to the stage, Chris Browning. Chris, welcome to IAB Upfronts.
Thanks for having me.
So you are F1's lead podcast editor, and with our very own Karen Bevan, who's out there somewhere, you produce the two official Formula One podcasts, Beyond the Grid and F1 Nation. For anybody that hasn't heard them, tell us a little about them.
Beyond the Grid is in its 5th season. It's the biggest motorsport podcast in the world. It's in-depth interviews with the stars of Formula One, the superstar drivers of today, the legendary champions of the past, and it's presented by Tom Clarkson, who is one of the most trusted voices in Formula One, and fans love listening to the intimate conversations that he has with the drivers. F1 Nation is a bit different. It's race reviews, it's race analysis. We follow the twists and turns of the season with F1 experts from all over the world. And if any of you have been watching F1 recently, there's been quite a lot of drama on and off track, so plenty for us to talk about on F1 Nation.
It certainly is. And by any measure, F1's entry into podcasting has been incredibly successful. So 80 million listens across the two shows, across all platforms, including YouTube. What's the secret?
Well, F1 has never been more popular. More and more people are watching because the racing's so good, and the Netflix series Drive to Survive has brought lots of fans to the sport. We're very lucky as F1 in that there are lots of unofficial F1 podcasts, but overwhelmingly, F1 fans come to Formula One, the official shows, for their F1 content. We do our bit as producers to keep people listening. When they press play on one of our episodes, they stay with it for an hour, which is fantastic, phenomenal, and they're really, really listening in detail as well. So it's also the access that we get to the big stars of the sport. It's unrivaled. Our episode today is an exclusive with F1's newest driver. He's not even raced in the sport yet, really, but he's been on our show.
Superb. And some of the episodes, I mean, as you say, the access that you get is incredible. And we do have some stats in a second around the show, but I briefly want to touch on YouTube. So I mentioned it there. So both shows are available in audio form, obviously, across Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But they also go out on the F1 official YouTube channel. But there's something a little different about the episodes that go out there.
Yeah, we only put the audio on YouTube. We don't film our interviews.
Why is that?
Simply, we find that we get a better, more intimate interview. People are more willing to open up to us if there aren't cameras there. But we put them on YouTube because F1 has 8 million YouTube subscribers who are really hungry for content. And our listening figures there, retention figures there as well, are both really good.
No, it's a really incredible story. And I think a very commercially friendly audience that, as you've said, avidly can consume the show. And in fact, we've got some stats here on the screen. So we've got 90%, this is across both shows, 90% audience retention, 80-20 male-female split.
Yes, and the female proportion of the audience is growing quickly, which is really, really good to see. We're really pleased with that.
And it's a global audience, and the US and UK dominate. And as you can see there, 70% of the audience falling into that very commercially attractive 25 to 44 bracket. And I think crucially though, for both shows, it's a really cost-effective way for brands to be involved with and align themselves with the F1 brand.
Yeah, F1 is the pinnacle of world motorsport. It's got the biggest audience, the most fans all over the world. And you look at the lineup of brands that pay to put their logos on the front wings of cars or the crash barriers at the racetrack. They are the best of the best. And advertising on one of our podcasts is certainly a more cost-effective way of reaching the global audience of F1 fans. They're really passionate. They love what we're producing for them. And there's less risk of your podcast advert being damaged in a crash than if you have your logo on a barrier or a front wing. So it's a good thing to do.
The RSS system is very stable. So
it won't get hit in a crash.
No, it won't get hit, no. So you have a lot of commercial activity across both shows. How do you approach that? How do you approach it with Tom, the host, and with the clients?
Very similar to what Danni and Alex were saying about Devils in the Dark. Our hosts use everything that they promote. We know how to talk to F1 fans because the people who produce it are F1 fans. We're F1 fans ourselves, so we tailor our copy, we make sure that the live reads are delivered in a really authentic way, and brands keep coming back to us because we have a really engaged audience who love the F1 content and they engage with the products that are advertised within it.
Oh, they really do. Again, that stat there, 90% audience retention. Chris, that's all we've got time for, so thank you very much. Next race?
Austin, US Grand Prix this weekend.
Are you going?
No.
Ooh. Do they send you out there?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Maybe Brazil, if I'm lucky.
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Let's everybody pray for Chris. Thank you very much. Chris Browning, F1.
That was great. You didn't sound a bit gutted about not going at the weekend anyway.
I'm not bothered at all.
Good. Question, Mike, on engagement. Is there this tension? I mean, some of the numbers you're showing now are absolutely huge. I mean, they are in the realms of when we talk about things like telly. I mean, the numbers are that big. Is there that tension between listeners that are so engaged and somewhere within the business going, we can get lots more ads in here because we've got lots more people? How do you kind of handle that?
Yes, I think there's a respect when it comes to how much commercial activity we can put in a podcast. I think that the Fish mentioned it actually. In a typical radio hour, you might hear 18 to 20 adverts across maybe 3 chunks, 3 stop downs. In the podcast, you might hear 3. And so we're very careful and I think respectful to the audience. I always think that podcast listeners have a very good bullshit meter, and they really, you really have to respect them. So we do it carefully. But when a show sells out like F1, the price goes up. So
the old market forces at play. And Chris, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, most amazing guest you could have that you haven't had on the pod.
Kanye West?
Very good. Massive hand for Audioboom.